We usually think of language as a tool, right? A way to describe the world out there. But what if it's also the tool we use to build the world inside of us? Today, we're diving into this incredible idea that the words we use don't just label our feelings, they might actually be creating them. So, let's kick things off with a pretty big question. Is the joy you feel the exact same as the joy someone feels in Poland or Senegal or Japan? Is it a universal thing? Well, as we're about to find out, the answer is way more complicated than a simple yes or no. And it tells us something really fundamental about how our minds work. To help us figure this out, we're going to lean on the work of psychologist Tim Lomas. And he has this amazing metaphor for it all. A language's vocabulary is like a map. It doesn't just show you the landmarks of a culture, it literally defines the whole landscape of human experience. So you can think of Lomas as a kind of emotional map maker, on this huge mission to chart our inner worlds. But what makes a psychologist decide to collect words from the more than 7,000 languages spoken on Earth?
For him, it all started with a trip he took. When he was a teenager traveling in China, he ran into these really detailed ideas about well-being that he just didn't have words for in English. He realized there are, and this is his phrase, real limitations if we only view our emotional lives through the prism of English.
And that brings us to this idea you've probably seen pop up online, so-called untranslatable words. Lomas's collection is absolutely packed with them, and they give us a fantastic window into feelings we might not have a name for. So let's take a quick trip around the world. First up, we've got the Arabic word darab. Now, this isn't just being happy or enjoying something. It's a super specific state of enchantment, a kind of ecstasy that can only be sparked by music. It's an emotion that's tied to one very specific, very powerful trigger. Next, let's look at this really complex, fascinating feeling from German, Zielschmerz. You know that feeling, that bittersweet cocktail of thrilling excitement and absolute paralyzing dread you get when you're finally about to get something you've wanted for years? It's like the fear of actually succeeding. And some of these words, well, they're not just a feeling, they're a whole way of life. In Senegal, the Wolof word teranga describes this deep, all-encompassing spirit of hospitality and generosity. It's a core part of their national identity, and it's something they show to everyone, friends and strangers. It's an emotion that's also a philosophy. Okay, so we've just looked at these incredible, specific words. But here's where things take a really interesting turn. This whole popular idea of a word being truly untranslatable, it might just be a myth. Yeah, a linguist named David Shariat-Madari points out that if these words were really untranslatable, we wouldn't be able to describe them, right? We just did. He says it's much more accurate to say they just don't have a single word equivalent in English. We can definitely explain Zielschmerz, it just takes a whole sentence instead of one neat little word. And this, right here, is the big aha moment. The most mind-blowing differences aren't in these exotic, culturally specific words. No, they're in the words we think of as the most basic, the absolute fundamentals of emotion, like happiness, sadness, and anger. Turns out, they're not universal at all. Just take happiness. In English, you can be happy because you found a good parking spot. It's casual. But in Polish, the word for happiness, szczęście, is something much, much bigger. It's saved for a rare, deep kind of bliss, the kind you feel in connection to the most important things in life: love, family, meaning. So the emotional contours, as one writer put it, are just completely different.
Okay, so if even our most basic emotion words aren't the same everywhere, that brings up a massive question. Why? How do words actually end up shaping what we feel? For that answer, we've got to look at the brain.
Neuroscientist Kristen Lindquist has this really revolutionary theory. She says that words aren't just these passive labels we slap on feelings that are already there. Nope. She argues that language is an active ingredient. Words are the actual building blocks our brain uses to construct an experience into a recognizable emotion.
So how the heck does that work? Well, you can think of it as a three-step process. First, you just have raw data. Your heart's racing, your palms are sweaty, you've got a knot in your stomach. Step 2, your brain starts rapidly sorting all those feelings, trying to file them away based on things you felt before. But the feeling is still pretty fuzzy, until step 3. That's when a word, like anxiety or excitement, acts like glue. It binds all those sensations together into one coherent, identifiable emotion.
Lindquist has this perfect analogy for it. Think about the pixels on a computer screen. Without the software that uses categories, like mountain or sky, to group those pixels, they'd just be a random, meaningless splash of color. She says that's what language does for our feelings. It provides the crucial categories for our abstract inner worlds.
So, if language literally helps build our emotional reality, what happens when you learn a new one? Well, you might actually be able to expand that reality.
And according to linguist Anita Pavlenko, that's exactly what happens. When you learn a new language, you're not just learning new labels for the same old feelings. You can literally restructure those mental filing cabinets we use to sort our emotions. Take anger, for example. In English, you probably have one big bucket for that feeling. But if you learn a language that has, say, 3 or 4 different words for different kinds of anger, well, now you're forced to notice those nuances. You actually start to feel your own emotions with more detail, which expands how you think about and experience something as basic as being angry. But, and this is a huge but, there's a catch. Pavlenko is very clear that just memorizing words on flashcards is not going to cut it. If you want that brain restructuring benefit, you have to actually use the new words in real situations, ideally when you're talking about feelings. And that brings us right back where we started, with our guide, Tim Lomas. His whole project isn't just about collecting cool-sounding words. He says it's about trying to appreciate how different people live and experience life. And he believes that words are one of the best tools we have for doing just that. So, we'll leave you with this thought. If every language is really a map to a different emotional world, it means our own inner landscape isn't set in stone. It can be explored, it can be expanded, it can be redrawn. So the only question left is, what new worlds are you waiting to discover?